Hindsight is 2020. If you ever wish you planted more of something, less of something, or wish you planted it in a different spot or at a different time, this video is for you. Today, I'm going to take you through my entire garden planting process, start to finish, in 6 easy steps to make sure every year, including this year, is your best harvest yet. Make sure you stick around to the very end, and I'll go over some quick tips when you're shopping for seed varieties. Hi guys, I'm April from Resprout. Like and subscribe for more garden tips and tutorials from my suburban front yard garden where I help you garden like a boss. So first things first, go grab a warm cup of tea, grab your garden journal, and we're gonna go over last year. The first thing I like to ask myself is what went well? One of the things I do at this stage is finalize my planting spreadsheet, plugging in all the weights of all the crops I harvested so I can see the results. This year, I was really happy with my cantaloupe production. I switched from trellising them to putting them in raised beds, and I went from 1 melon to over 20 melons. That's over 52 pounds. My broccoli, which I planted in the fall for the first time because of a tip from a farmer friend, was virtually pest-free as a result. I got over 21 pounds there. I grew some new crops that went well too. Radishes, sweet potatoes, blackberries, jalapeno, and a new variety of cherry tomato, Montesino, which is a keeper. I got better yields on some old standby crops too. Carrots especially, which I feel like I finally got the hang of. I also switched from June bearing to ever-bearing strawberries, which I enjoyed much more. As far as infrastructure, I built 1 new bed, which you guys saw in a previous video. And as far as harvest numbers, I got a total of 310 pounds of produce, which is about half as much as I usually get. That being said, 310 pounds is still amazing, and it roughly adds up to over $1,000 US in organic produce. The next question I like to ask myself is what can be improved? Last year was a really tough year for me. I actually spent most of the growing season on and off a crutch, so it made it really hard getting around the garden, getting around the house, really getting around anywhere. I didn't get to my succession plantings, which really hurt my yields. There were some crops I should have planted less of, beets and cantaloupe, and there were some full sun crops, peanuts and basil, that I planted in areas that had too much shade. I had some snafus with my irrigation, which caused a complete loss of 2 crops I did manage to succession plant, my second planting of carrots and cucumbers. For me, I think the story of the garden last year is that I didn't get to spend as much time in the garden that I wanted to or that I was planning to, and that's really what I want to improve this year. So that brings me to the next step, garden goals. So I kind of tricked you guys. If you were following along and wrote down what went well and what can be improved, you are already halfway there to figuring out your goals for this year. Half of the plan will be to do more of what went well and improve on the things you identified. Another question to ask here is what are your general gardening goals? And what projects can help support those goals? It can be as simple as having more pollinators in your yard, gardening more with your kids, or finally growing a real tomato. One of my main goals this year is because I have a small garden, I want to take better advantage of the space that I do have. For me, that means more densely planting my perennial bed, finally installing the 2 beds I had planned for the empty space in the front garden, and finally planting the raspberries and installing the trellis I had planned for the empty spot in my vertical garden area. My other goal is to increase my crop yields. I want to stay out of the grocery store and grow as much as I can for my household, all the fruits and vegetables that we eat. For this, I go back to my planting and harvest spreadsheet and fill out how much I want of each crop. This is a tip I picked up from the book, The Market Gardener by Jean-Martin Fortier. It's meant to get farmers thinking about how many bunches of carrots they want to sell, but it's equally as important, if not more so, to home gardeners, I think. For the most part, I go off my previous year's number of plants and increase or decrease this number based on how much I got last year. If you haven't done this for your garden before, the best way to come up with the initial numbers is from your grocery store receipts or shopping lists or weekly menus. If you've ever thought to yourself, wow, I'd love to have a green smoothie every day for breakfast, or I'd love to have a hot vegetable every night for dinner for my family, this is the time to make those diet decisions. Yeah, like for the whole year. No pressure at all. As terrifying as this sounds, this yields goal tip was a game changer for me because it forced me to make menu decisions in the beginning of the garden season, not after I already had 50 pounds of zucchini and no actual plan for them. One of my main menu goals this year is to have enough greens all year round for a salad a day for 2 people. I definitely did not have enough fresh greens last year. I'm also trying to eat more fruit, either fresh, dried, frozen, or canned. So that's another goal, to be able to keep us in fruit all year round. For that, the new raspberry bed is gonna help, and I'm planning to add figs and an extra bed of strawberries. We eat a lot of stir fry, so I try to plant enough for 1 to 2 freezer bags per month of mixed vegetables like onions, peppers, broccoli, and carrots. Also, I don't know about you, but my harvest goals have changed a bit since the pandemic, since I've been noticing that things are getting a little hard to find. So for example, organic kale and organic onions, I just have been having a problem with lately. And I almost didn't put potatoes in my garden plan this year because they're so cheap at the store, but I actually read an article recently that said there might be a shortage of potatoes this year. So this is something I'm definitely planting now. I'm also hoping to plant mushrooms and peanuts and expand my perennial vegetables and herbs this year. There's so many different goals you could have for your garden. I've shared mine, let's hear yours. Leave your goals down in the comments so we can all hear what you're doing and get some good ideas. So have you guys finished your tea yet? Let's go outside and take a peek and see what we're working with. Now, if you don't have any garden beds yet, no big deal. Check out my bed build video, which I'll link above and below. This survey step will help us find the best location for our beds and for our crops. If you don't already have a map of your property, now's the time to draw it out. Make sure you have the exact dimensions of the beds because we're gonna need those to figure out how many plants to plant and seeds to start. I'd recommend naming your beds too. This has really helped me refer back to them in my spreadsheet and in my garden journal. Also, this gives you serious garden nerd cred. For my front garden, they're numbered left to right, and in my trellis area on the side of the driveway, they're lettered from front to back. Another thing to note on your map is the shade areas. That's south for me, and I'm in the northern hemisphere, so I always get shade here at the end of my beds in the late afternoon. I really need to trim these trees, and I'm definitely adding that to my task list this year. This fence in my trellis area actually casts a lot of shade in the first part of the day, so that's something I need to be aware of. It's the reason why my peanuts didn't do very well last year. And because of where the sun is, these back trellises here get a lot more shade than the ones in front of it. Also, label the areas in your yard you have or want to have vertical crops. Ideally, run your trellises north to south, and if you have to do east to west, put them on the northern side of your garden if you're in the northern hemisphere, and in the southern side of the garden if you're in the southern hemisphere, so you don't block other plants. Because my garden is in the front yard, I'm keenly aware of what vertical trellises look like, usually pretty junky. My first garden beds in my front yard had trellises. And even though I tried to make some really nice wood ones, I found I just did not like how it looked from the street, blocking my big picture window. So that's when I decided that this area on the right side of my driveway was gonna be my vertical garden area. Some other things that you might want to note too is if you have soil that is a different type, like let's say you had a specific area that was sandy or wet. If you have high traffic areas, label those too. For me, that's along the street sidewalk, the driveway, and my front walkway. I try to put my more attractive plants here and plants that are less likely to be ruined by an errant footstep, tire, ice melt, or peeing dog. A couple years ago, I actually tried to plant this sidewalk strip right here with strawberries, and it was a disaster for that very reason. If you have perennials or existing annuals, label those. For me, that's my blackberries, my strawberries, my entire perennial bed, plus some fall planted garlic. Okay, so now that we're armed with all this data, let's go back inside and talk about growing season. To nail down our garden plan, we need to figure out our growing season, how long it lasts, and when it starts and when it stops. The first component to this is going to be the last frost date in the spring and the first frost date in the fall. All the days between that are our frost-free dates, and for most of us, that's our growing season. So on my planting spreadsheet here, I input the first and last frost date, and this does a lot of heavy lifting for me, as I'll show you soon. Once you know your first and your last frost date, the next question is, do you want to use season extenders? This year, I'm planning on making some more permanent glass cold frames to help me with my year-round greens goal. And I usually use row covers in the spring and fall to push the frost out a couple degrees. Hoop houses and greenhouses are also other forms of season extension. Depending on where you live, how you're protecting, and the crop varieties you choose, you can add weeks, even months to your growing season. One thing to consider is succession planting, which is planting another set of crops once you've harvested the first set. This is something that's a bit overwhelming, so I don't usually recommend it for beginner gardeners. It is perfectly okay to plant once in the spring, harvest all summer, and let your garden peter out as fall approaches. But if you're looking to level up your garden production, this is the #1 way to do it. It takes no extra room to simply fill the space left by your spring and summer crops. This year, I want to do a lot better with my succession planting to take advantage of all the extra space in my garden. Zucchini and cucumbers I like to do succession plantings of because disease usually takes the first crop before the end of the season. And then other crops like carrots and potatoes and greens, I like to squeeze extra plantings in just because I harvest these so early in the year and I always need more of these. I like to do fall broccoli after harvesting garlic in the summer, and this year I'm going to try doing beans after spring peas. I'm still trying to come up with other great succession combinations. If you have some favorites, leave them down in the comments below. Okay, here's the fun part, guys. And because you've done all the hard work and you've gotten your map together and decided your growing season and decided your goals, this should be pretty easy. So you can use a notebook, a piece of paper, or what I actually use is, drumroll please, a spreadsheet. This is the same spreadsheet I showed you guys earlier. I list all my crops here on the left. I would say 95% of these are the same crops I grew last year. Maybe not the same varieties, but the same crops. What's great about using a spreadsheet is I just copy over last year's sheet, so it's quick. And then I just add the new crops at the bottom. And then, boys and girls, here is a lesson I learned the hard way. Ask your family what they do and don't like. So a couple years ago, I planted a whole bed of beets, and turns out the hubs doesn't like beets all that much, and that caused a real cooking issue. So as much as I personally like some of these, I'm going to delete and adjust my yield goals for some of these hubs unapproved veggies.
I do think I can squeeze some of these into dinner though, and he won't notice.
So what we have now is this beautiful list of all the crops that are going into our garden this year, our wish list, if you will. The next step is deciding where to put them. First, I put the existing plants in their proper places. I plug the bed names into my spreadsheet here. From there, I tackle the highest priority crops first, so those go in the best spots and they don't get forgotten. Highest priority is always tomatoes, so those go over in the trellis area, and I usually do 4 trellises. I'm gonna put them in the most southern trellises, which get the best light. While I'm in here, let's do the other vertical crops. So for me, that's raspberries, cucumbers, green beans, and peas. Notice I'm putting pea and pole beans in the same bed. This is where using a spreadsheet instead of a map really helps because I can easily keep track of the fact that I'm planting beans after peas just by changing the direct sow date. And the spreadsheet tells me when the peas will be ready to come out, so I can easily copy that date. Another high priority for me are greens, so I'm gonna plan for 1 full bed of salad and cooking greens. Also, remember that shady spot by my fence? It's not the best spot, but the thing that would thrive there the most is green, so I'm gonna put more greens over there. I'll consider those bonus greens. I'm not gonna depend on them. And if you guys have seen my broccoli leaf harvesting video, you know I love my broccoli leaves, so that will supplement my greens bed too. 2 more goals of mine were more perennials and herbs and to better plant my foundation perennial bed. I've always shied away from mixing perennials and annuals, but I think this year I'm gonna put all the herbs, perennial or not, in the front foundation bed. That should save me some space in my regular beds and keep everything organized. We'll see how it goes. And this is where I'm gonna add the fig tree, and at the end of it, an artichoke plant. I've never tried these before. I'm super excited about these. Another easy bed is what I call the miscellaneous bed. It's basically 1 bed with a little bit of everything. If I only want a few plants of something, it goes in here. Next up is the succession crops, which are plants that go in after other plants. In the case of this edamame, I'm gonna make it the spring crop right before one of the fall broccoli beds. I'm also gonna do a second carrot sowing, a second potato crop, fall planted onions and garlic, which will all go in beds already assigned. For greens, I plan on doing multiple sowings in the one greens bed spring through fall. And then I plan on making my trellis area into a greens planting area over the winter with some glass I have saved up. Now that we have everything assigned to the proper bed space, now's the time to see if we need to flip any of the beds around. You might want to do this if you planted the same crop in that bed last year, or in my case, beds 8 and 9 don't exist yet. So I'm gonna move around the beds so that I don't have spring crops planned for those two beds. I'll make those two my melon and miscellaneous beds since those don't get seedlings for another month and a half. That should give me enough time to finish the beds. So the last thing we're gonna wanna do is fine tune the number of plants or seeds we need based on the dimensions of our bed and the spacings of the plants. So for instance, this new strawberry bed here, strawberries need 12-inch spacings in raised beds, so 1 every foot. My beds are 14 feet by 3 feet, so that comes out to 42 plants. So now that we have everything mapped out, it is time to go shopping. The best place to start shopping for seeds is your own seed collection. I would say the majority of what I grow is seeds that I've grown in the past that I've liked. I keep the brand name and variety in the spreadsheet so I remember. And I'll even make notes about the variety here and put a link to the product page for easy reordering and checking on planting details. What's great about keeping notes this way is I can look back at my old sheets from past years and see my notes on other varieties I've tried. If the product page or seed packet has it, I fill out dates to maturity, the weeks it needs to be started before transplant, spacing, and other information. If you're looking for more general crop data, not specific to the variety, visit my website at resprout.com and you can download a PDF chart with this info for all the top edible crops. Now, because this is a spreadsheet, I actually programmed this thing to take this info and tell me when I need to start a specific seed based on my frost or planting date and what date I'll be able to harvest based on the dates to maturity. And I enter the weights of everything I harvest in each week, so it's a great record of how much I harvested or didn't harvest and exactly when, which helps me time my harvest and quantities better the following year. Last year, I even made a new column with the going price per pound of the different crops, so it even tells me how much my blackberries were worth. Turns out, quite a bit. This is really great if you have spouses that claim you spend too much money on your garden. This spreadsheet, as long as it took me to set up, was worth every single hour because it answers about 1 billion questions I have about my garden, and every year it helps me better fine-tune the quantities and the timing more and more. If you want your own crazy garden nerd spreadsheet to do all the heavy lifting for you, you can come to my website at resprout.com and download a copy that you can customize yourself. Now, once you have an idea of the seeds you want to plant that you already have, it's time to fill in the gaps. Here's the seed shopping tips I promised you guys at the beginning of the video. If you've had specific issues in the past, try varieties that deal with those issues. A good example for me is tomato cracking. This year, I'm trying 2 new varieties, one that says it resists cracking and another one that has thick skin. Most crops have varieties that resist specific diseases. In my experience, those are worth every penny if that's a disease you struggle with. If you're trying to plant things outside of their normal growing season, look at the variety name for clues. For example, this new red fire lettuce I'm going to be planting over the summer. It's bred to resist bolting and tip burn. Cold hardy varieties might have words like hardy, winter, or Russian in their names. These are all varieties I'm planting in my winter garden this year. If you're looking for something that you can harvest quickly, remember to check for days to maturity in the seed info and compare it against other varieties. Sometimes quicker varieties have names with words like first or early in them. Some varieties have information about how long they will stay fresh in your garden once mature or how long they will produce. Look for phrases like harvest window, field holding, overwintering, indeterminate, determinate, or everbearing. Many crops like greens, zucchini, and eggplant can be harvested in both baby and mature form. Peppers change color and can be eaten green or red or anything in between depending on your taste. A long harvest window is good if it's something you want to eat fresh and simply leave in your garden until you're ready to eat or process it. On the other hand, if you're doing a succession planting immediately afterwards or have a big preserving day, you might want all the vegetables to be ready at the same time so you can pull the entire bed at the same time. Open pollinated seeds are seeds you can save and they stay true to the original parent seed. Hybrid seeds won't, but they've often been specially bred for various purposes, so it might be worth the extra cost for those. I usually try the open pollinated seeds first, and then if they don't perform well, I'll try the hybrid seeds after that. While I'm shopping, as I find the varieties I want, I write them down here in the spreadsheet and add a link back to the product page. Then, when it's time to place my order, I sort the spreadsheet by seed status, N for need, and then by brand. Then it takes just a few minutes to go to each product page, add it to my cart and the numbers I already figured out. And there you go, garden plan is done.
Now it's time to get a margarita.
I hope this video helped you out. Remember to sign up for my email newsletter for more garden resources. And keep gardening like a boss, and I'll see you guys soon.